I stepped into the small-town library that dusty summer morning, the air thick with aged paper and faint mildew. The quiet pressed in heavy, shelves towering like silent witnesses to secrets long shelved. Behind the desk stood the head librarian, posture straight, eyes unflinching, as she assigned the shelving task. Her voice came low and measured, directing me to the top shelf without extra words. I felt the immediate pull, her presence steady while my hands already trembled unsteady. The first climb on the ladder drew me closer, her grip on the base unspoken but firm. The library sat in rural isolation, windows filtering muted light onto worn wooden floors that creaked underfoot like old bones settling. Outside, fields stretched endless under a hazy sky, but inside, the world narrowed to these walls, cut off from the town's watchful eyes. I remember unpacking tools in the back room, the faint dust motes dancing in the slanted beam from a high window. Her brief instructions lingered there, tone carrying like that dust in sunlight, settling slow, impossible to shake. She moved with efficiency, contained, hands smoothing a stack of returns with quiet precision. Each book aligned just so, spines facing out like soldiers at attention. I watched from the corner of my eye, the way her fingers lingered a second on the edges, as if tracing something personal in the leather. The initial awkwardness hung in the silence, broken only by the soft thud of books being placed. My own hands fumbled at first, the weight of volumes pulling at my arms, but her rhythm set the pace, steady as the tick of a distant clock. Then she glanced up, once, gaze meeting mine briefly across the stacks. It revealed a flicker, something unreadable. Curiosity, maybe, or caution. Her eyes were dark, steady, holding the room's shadows. I looked away quick, heat rising in my chest, the air suddenly thicker. The library's hush amplified it all, every shuffle of paper, every breath drawn too loud. As she passed nearby to reshelve a cart, I caught the faint scent of her soap, clean and herbal, cutting through the musty air like a cool breeze off the fields. It clung, subtle, mixing with the ink in old pages. I paused mid-reach, book halfway to the shelf, my pulse thudding uneven. Why did it steady me and unsettle all at once? The town outside whispered its judgments, conservative roots digging deep. But here, in this space she commanded, the rules felt different, unspoken, bending just enough. I shelved lower rows first, knees brushing the floorboards, dust gathering on my jeans. She worked parallel, a few aisles over, her steps measured, blouse shifting with each turn. The light caught the line of her jaw, taut but not rigid, like wire under strain. I wondered about the life behind that focus, the years spent in this quiet domain, guarding stories others dared not tell. My own arrival was fresh, an outsider hired for the summer, escaping city noise for this isolation. But isolation had its own weight, pressing questions inward. The silence stretched, comfortable, yet edged. A patron entered once, footsteps echoing, but they left soon, leaving us again to the rhythm. I placed a book wrong, spine out of line, and caught her adjusting it later, fingers precise, no judgment in the motion. Or was there? Her presence filled the space without crowding, a gravity pulling glances my way. I felt exposed, hands unsteady on the cart, the herbal scent returning as she wheeled past again. By midday, the awkwardness eased into something routine, but that flicker from her glance lingered. What did she see in me? The new hire, fumbling in her ordered world. The floors gleamed under the muted light, but shadows pooled in corners, hiding whatever truths the shelves held. I wiped sweat from my brow, the air warming, her soap's trace fading but not gone. It marked the hours, a quiet anchor in the hush. As the day wore on, the task escalated to the higher shelves, pulling us into necessary proximity. The ladder waited in the corner, old wood scarred from years of use, and I knew the climb would change the distance between us. I wheeled the cart loaded with heavy volumes toward the tallest stacks, the ladder's shadow stretching long across the floorboards. The old wooden ladder leaned against the wall, scarred from years of climbs, its rungs worn smooth in places, rough in others. I positioned it carefully against the shelves, the top just brushing the uppermost ledge where forgotten titles gathered dust. A soft creak echoed in the empty aisles, the sound carrying like a whisper in the hush. She watched from a few feet away, arms crossed loosely, her blouse sleeves rolled to the elbows. The light from the high window slanted in, catching the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. "Reach the top shelf," she said, voice steady, no room for question. She stepped forward without hesitation, her boots firm on the wood, and placed her hands on the base. I nodded, gripping the sides, the grain biting into my palms. My foot hit the first rung, then the second, the latter shifting slightly under my weight. It wobbled, a faint tremor running through the frame, and her grip tightened instantly. Her fingers wrapped around the legs, knuckles pressing white against the dark wood. I paused halfway up, heart thudding, the stability coming from her hold more than the ladder's own. "Steady now," she murmured, low enough that it vibrated through the air between us. From above, the view shifted everything. Her head tilted back, neck exposed in the dim light filtering through the branches outside, a pale line unbroken by the collar of her blouse. Strands of her hair caught the glow, dark against the shadows pooling below. I could see the rise of her shoulders with each breath, measured, controlled, the library's quiet amplifying it all. Every small shift in her stance sent a ripple up the ladder, my body attuned to the steadiness she provided. The air up here felt cooler, dust motes swirling lazy in the beam that reached my level. I stretched for the first book, arm extending, the volume heavy in my grasp. But as I leaned, the ladder swayed again, a creak louder this time. Her hands clamped firmer, a subtle tension in the way her body leaned into it, mirroring the knot tightening in my chest. I froze, balance precarious, the drop not far, but sudden in my mind. That's when her hand came up, steadying my ankle briefly. Her palm pressed warm through the fabric of my jeans, fingers firm, but not gripping. Just enough to guide my foot back to the rung. The touch lingered a second longer than needed, skin on denim, a jolt that settled low. I glanced down, her eyes meeting mine unflinching. No words, just that hold. The herbal scent of her soap rose faint, mixing with the musty pages, cutting sharp through the stillness. I placed the book, spine aligning with the others, but my hand shook slight on the way down. She released the base only when my feet touched solid floor, stepping back with a nod. The ladder stood between us now, a barrier and a bridge. The aisles felt narrower after that, the silence thicker, charged with the echo of her touch. We moved to the next stack, routine settling but edged. Her presence below became the anchor, each climb pulling me higher, closer in ways the task demanded. The wood groaned familiar under my weight, her grip a constant now, unspoken. I caught myself anticipating it, the way her knuckles paled, the steady breath syncing with mine. Days blended into routine climbs after that, each one layering unspoken layers onto the quiet routine. Days turned the shelving into habit, the ladder's groan a familiar rhythm syncing with our steps. Each morning, I'd push through the heavy door, the bell's soft jangle swallowed quick by the hush. The wood settled under my grip, rungs warming from repeated climbs, her hands always there at the base, steady as the earth's pull. We didn't speak of it, the way the task bound us closer, but the air held it, thick with the scent of polished oak and pages yellowed by time. Fog clung outside some mornings, veiling the fields in gray, the library's warmth drawing me inward like a hearth in winter. I'd shake off the damp from my coat, boots leaving faint prints on the mat, while she moved already through her domain. The space felt smaller then. Windows steamed at the edges, the world beyond blurred to nothing. Her presence filled it, a quiet command that pulled me toward the stacks without a word. I watched her prepare sometimes, before patrons stirred. She'd dust the shelves with deliberate strokes, cloth whispering over spines, body taut under her simple blouse. The fabric shifted with each reach, outlining the line of her shoulders, the curve of her back as she stretched for a high corner. Dust rose faint, catching the early light, and I'd pause with the cart, hands idle on the handles, pulse quickening at the focus in her movements. It was labor, plain, but intimate in the quiet. Her fingers trailing wood, wiping away years of neglect. The air thickened during those holds, her proximity below sending warmth up through the rungs, like heat from soil after rain. I'd climb slow, foot by foot, the ladder creaking in protest, her grip firming as I rose. From up there, the view sharpened, her head steady, hair tucked back, the faint line of her jaw set. Breath shared in the stillness, mine shallow, hers even, the library amplifying every shift. A boot scuff, a sleeve brush. My skin prickled, the rungs cool under palms slick with sudden sweat. Near silence broke in fragments, her quiet questions slipping out like notes from a hidden book. "Where'd you come from?" she'd ask one day, voice low as she handed up a volume, eyes not quite meeting mine. I answered sparse. A town over the ridge, roots tangled in fields like these. Words probing back, careful. Another time, as fog lifted outside, she murmured about the summer heat pressing in, how it mirrored the town's grip on its own. Her tone lingered, sparse but weighted, pulling at threads I kept buried. Her eyes followed my reach always, unflinching, as if measuring more than book placement. I'd extend for the top shelf, arms straining, and feel that gaze track the motion, steady, dark, holding the shadows of the stacks. It wasn't judgment, not exactly, but something deeper, like she saw the tremble in my hold, the way my fingers hesitated on the spine. From below, she'd adjust her stance, body leaning slight, and I'd catch the herbal trace of her soap rising, mixing with the musty weight of the air. It unsettled me, that watchfulness, stirring questions I pushed down. Internal conflict rose slow, the conservative town's whispers about outsiders amplifying my caution. Folks nodded at me in the market, eyes lingering too long, words laced with that edge. New face, stirring things up. I felt it here, too, in the library's walls, the weight of eyes that might judge if the quiet cracked. Her domain carried the same restraint, faith ties woven into the community's fabric, binding tight. I wondered if she felt it, that pull against the rules, her posture straight but shoulders carrying unseen load. My own fears mirrored it, longings hidden under work-worn hands, the risk of a glance too long in a place where silence demanded conformity. The routine layered it on, climbs blending into weeks, her grip a constant I craved and dreaded. Mornings fogged, air warming, questions sparse but sharpening. The ladder's grown marked time, our rhythm unspoken, tension coiling like wire under strain. I caught myself lingering at the top, book placed but eyes drifting down, her form blurred in the dust motes. The town outside hummed its warnings, but inside, the pull grew. Cautious steps towards something unnamed. A dropped book interrupted the pattern one afternoon. A heavy volume tumbling from my grasp, pages fluttering like startled birds, forcing a shared retrieval that cracked the surface calm. It happened mid-afternoon, the light slanting low through the windows, casting long shadows across the aisles. I was up on the ladder again, reaching for the top shelf, the volume in my hand thicker than the others, its leather cover worn smooth from years of handling. My fingers slipped, sweat from the humid air, or maybe the weight of the day's tension, and the book tumbled from my grasp. Pages fluttered open like startled birds, the thud echoing sharp in the quiet as it hit the floorboards. I froze on the rung, heart slamming against my ribs, the ladder swaying slightly without her immediate hold. Below, she stepped forward quick, her boots scuffing soft on the wood. The book lay splayed between us, spine cracked, illustrations spilling out in faded ink. I climbed down fast, feet hitting solid ground, knees bending as I reached for it at the same time she did. Our knees brushed in the narrow aisle, denim on fabric, a contact so brief but grounding, pulling me back to the moment. Her hand came over mine on the cover, steadying it there, fingers warm against the cool leather binding. The jolt ran up my arm, skin meeting skin where the edge of my sleeve rode up. Silence stretched taut, the library's hush wrapping around us like a held breath. I could feel the pulse in her palm, faint but real, sinking with the thud in my chest. The herbal trace of her soap mingled with the book's musty scent, sharp in the close space. She didn't pull away right off. Her expression shifted then, A brief softening around her eyes, the unflinching mask cracking just enough to let something through. Vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. Her gaze held mine longer than before, dark and steady, pulling at the edges of what we'd kept unspoken. The air between us thickened, heavy with the weight of that drop, the interruption forcing us face to face in a way the latter never had. I glanced down at the book, her hand still there, and spotted the faded inscription on the flyleaf. Words scrawled in careful script, not printed, but personal. To Elena, with love that outlasts the pages. Yours forever, M. The date was old, 20 years back, the ink browned like autumn leaves. It hinted at history, a life tucked away in these stacks, something she'd guarded close. Her fingers tensed under mine and she closed the cover quick, the motion deliberate, shutting it away like a door on a memory. She straightened, book in hand now, her posture returning to that straight line, but the softening lingered in the set of her jaw. I stood too, knees still close in the aisle, the brush of fabric echoing in my skin. The library's hush deepened after that, as if the walls absorbed the unspoken pull between us, shelves leaning in like silent keepers of secrets. No patrons stirred. The town outside hummed distant, leaving only this space, charged and still. We retreated to tasks then, her handing the book back for shelving, my fingers brushing hers again in the exchange. Accidental, but the jolt repeated, softer this time. I climbed a ladder once more, placing it high, but awareness hummed now in every glance exchanged. From above, I caught her watching, eyes tracing my movements, not just the book, but the reach, the balance. Down below, her grip on the base felt different, firmer, like she held more than wood. The afternoon dragged, light fading to gold, but that moment stuck, the inscription burning in my mind. Who was M? What forever had cracked under the town's weight? Her mask was back, efficient in reshelving the cart, but cracks showed in the way her hands paused on spines, lingering longer. I wiped dust from my palms, the aisle feeling narrower, our rhythm off kilter. Silence had always been our language, but now it carried questions, pulling me toward the edges of her world. Curiosity about that inscription gnawed, leading me to solitary exploration in the stacks after hours, the library emptying as dusk settled outside. The library emptied slow that evening, patrons drifting out with the fading light, their footsteps echoing softer until the door's bell fell silent. I lingered, wiping down the lower shelves, the rag picking up dust that clung like regrets. Elena had already locked the front, her routine precise, keys jingling faint as she moved to the back. But curiosity burned from that inscription, pulling me toward the upper stacks alone. The ladder stood ready, its wood cool under my hands without her grip, steady on the floorboards scarred by years. I climbed quiet, rungs creaking just for me. The air up here cooler, laced with deeper must and the faint metallic tang of old bindings. Outside, dusk pressed against the windows, fields blurring to shadow under a sky turning bruised purple. The light inside dimmed, lamps humming low in the corners, casting pools on the worn paths below. Up on the top shelf, books huddled, forgotten, spines cracked, titles faded like whispers half heard. I pulled one at random, thick and overlooked, its cover rough under my fingers, leather flaking like dry earth after rain. As it opened, something slipped free, a photograph tucked between pages, edges yellowed and curled from time. I caught it mid-fall, the paper thin, almost tearing in my grasp. There she was, Elena. Younger, unguarded in a way the library never allowed. The image captured a rural scene, gravel road winding through fields, wildflowers nodding at the edges. She stood beside another woman, arms linked, loose but sure, shoulders touching in the afternoon sun. The other had sun-bleached hair, smile open, hand resting light on Elena's waist. They leaned into each other, backs against a weathered fence, the kind that marked boundaries in these parts. No poses, just that quiet hold, speaking volumes in the space it claimed. Defiance soft as summer wind. Love worn plain like work boots. A pang hit me then, sharp in the chest, mirroring my own hidden longings in this watchful town. I'd known that link, arms brushing in secret, eyes meeting across crowded rooms where words stayed locked. Here, where church steeples loomed and neighbors tallied sins, such touches hid under chores and closed doors. The photo blurred slight in my hand, not from tears, but the shake in my fingers, recognition settling heavy like dew on grass. Elena's face in the image held a lightness now gone, eyes crinkled at the corners, free from the unflinching mask. I flipped the book open further, and there was marginalia in her handwriting. Fragmented thoughts scrawled in pencil, faint but clear. Lines like, "Loss carves quiet spaces," along a passage on forgotten paths. Another, "Defiance in the margins, where they can't reach." Words of quiet rebellion, ink pressed hard in places, as if written under cover of night. They spoke of a love torn by the town's grip, faith's chains pulling tighter than expected, leaving echoes in the white spaces. My breath caught, the ladder suddenly too still without her below, the solitude amplifying the intrusion. The weight of it pressed in, the wrongness of holding her secrets, paper rough against my skin like burrs caught in wool. This wasn't mine to find, a glimpse into her guarded world, cracked open by accident. Yet the urge pulled stronger, to understand the woman behind the steady hands, the voice low and measured. What did that love cost her, arms unlinked under prying eyes? I traced the photo's edge, the women's linked forms blurring with the dusk outside, my pulse thudding uneven in the hush. Doubt settled slow, coiling in my gut. But I folded the photograph, careful, tucking it back with the marginalia. The book's pages whispered shut, heavy in my arms as I descended, rungs solid but lonely. I shelved it high again, fingers lingering on the spine, the texture grounding me. Night deepened outside, stars pricking through the windows, the library's silence now a companion to my churning thoughts. Returning the item the next day sparked an after-closing encounter, her presence filling the dim space, questions hanging, unspoken, in the air. Closing time crept in that evening, the library emptying like breath let out slow. Patrons shuffled out last, arms full of borrowed worlds, their footsteps fading into the dusk outside. I lingered by the circulation desk, rag in hand, wiping counters that gleamed already under the low lamps. The air hung cooler now, windows dark against the fields, stars just pricking through. Elena moved through her routine, methodical and close, keys jingling soft as she checked the stacks, turning locks on cabinets with a click that echoed too loud in the hush. Her blouse sleeves stayed rolled, forearms marked faint with the day's dust, and I caught myself watching the way her fingers tested each door, precise, unhurried. She passed near me once, close enough that the herbal scent of her soap brushed back the musty quiet. I nodded, words stuck, the photo from yesterday burning in my mind like a hidden ember. I'd tucked it back careful that night, pages smoothed, but doubt gnawed. Had I left a trace? The book sat on her desk now, reshelved wrong on purpose, a quiet return that felt like confession. She paused at the front door, key in the lock, twisting it with a final turn. The bell didn't jangle. Everything settled heavy. "You." Her voice called me back, tone even but edged, like a page turned too quick. I turned from the counter, rag twisting in my grip, and there she stood by her desk, the book open under the lamplight. Questioning eyes met mine, unflinching but sharper than before. "Did you move this?" She didn't raise her voice, but the words cut through the empty space, pulling me across the floorboards. I stepped closer, boots soft on the wood, the vulnerability hitting hard. No patrons to buffer, no footsteps to interrupt the building intimacy. The library felt vast and small at once, shelves leaning in like witnesses to whatever cracked next. Lamplight cast shadows long across her desk, pooling dark under the stacks of returns, her face half lit, jaw set in that familiar line. She stood near, closer than the aisles allowed during hours, the air heavy with unsaid words. Dust from the day, ink from her notes, the faint warmth rising between us. I could see the fine lines at her mouth, the way her breath steadied deliberate. The book lay there, pages parted just so, the photo's edge peeking if you looked close. My pulse thudded low, the empty space amplifying it. No hum of voices to drown the tension coiling tight. Her hands, usually steady as the ladder's base, fidgeted now, fingers turning a keychain over and over, the metal catching light in small flashes. It revealed cracks, subtle but real, the polish of her routine slipping. She set it down abrupt, palm flat on the desk, and met my gaze again. "You found it." Not a question, but the edge in her tone softened slight, waiting. I nodded, throat dry, the rag forgotten in my fist. "The photo, the notes, I didn't mean to." But the words hung, pulling more out. She closed the book slow, fingers lingering on the cover, leather creaking under her touch. "This town's got walls higher than these shelves." Her words came sparse, hinting at shared isolation, the conservative grip that bound us both. Church suppers where eyes tally every glance, neighbors who whisper over fences about anything that bends the line. "Faith ties pulling tighter than you'd think," she added, voice dropping, gaze flicking to the window where night pressed black. I felt it too, the fear of standing out, roots in soil that choked difference. My own family back home, letters laced with questions, the weight of coming back changed. We stood there, dust between, but not enough, her keychain still under her hand, turning slow again. The air thickened, her proximity drawing the herbal scent close, mixing with the lamp's warm glow. I wanted to reach across, steady her like she did me on the rungs, but caution held, the town's constraints echoing in my chest. Yet her words hinted at the same cage, isolation we'd both carved quiet spaces to bear. "What keeps you here?" she asked, sparse, probing without pushing. Her eyes unflinching but edged with something raw. The pull tugged strong then, to confess my own fears, the longings buried under work and silence, the risk of her gaze unraveling it all. The silence between us felt like an invitation now, not a wall. The empty library breathing with us. I stepped closer, wood creaking underfoot, words forming on the edge. The conversation turned personal after that, leading to the raw edge of truth in the quiet. She leaned against the desk then, arms crossing loose, the keychain forgotten in the lamplight's glow. Her stories came guarded, spilling, slow like water from a cracked jug. "Community pressure," she said, voice low, the kind that starts with a glance at church and ends with doors locked against you. Faith ties binding tighter than expected. Sermons on conformity, elders watching for any bend in the line. She'd grown up here, roots deep in the soil that fed the fields outside. But those roots choked, too, pulling at choices made in secret. Her words painted it clear. Suppers where forks scraped plates louder than whispers. Neighbors tallying absences from prayer circles. The weight of expectation settling heavy as winter frost. I listened, the empty aisles stretching behind her like paths we'd walked unspoken. My own rural roots mirrored it, fear of gossip shaping every cautious step in this place. Back home, over the ridge, family gatherings turned sharp with questions. Who you walked with, where eyes lingered too long. I'd fled that for the summer, but it followed, clinging like burrs to wool. Here, the library felt safe at first, shelves a buffer against the town's hum. But her presence cracked it open, drawing parallels I'd buried. We were both outsiders in our own skin, longings hidden under layers of work and silence. We started pacing then, her leading us down the main aisle, footsteps soft on the floorboards. The air cooled further, night pressing through the windows, but her warmth cut it, proximity close enough to feel the shift in her breath. Her voice dropped to whispers that echoed internally, words about the photo's woman, Marianne, gone 10 years now, lost to the city's pull after the whispers turned to shouts. Elena's tone carried the raw edge, Faith's chains snapping one link at a time. But the cost lingered, a quiet hollow in her chest. I nodded, my own whispers joining. Nights staring at ceilings, heart thudding against ribs, fearing the wrong glance at a fair or market. Tension built in her nearness, shoulder brushing a shelf as she gestured to old volumes, fingers trailing spines worn from hands like ours. The wood rasped faint under her touch, dust rising in the dim light, and I felt it sink with my pulse, erratic now. She pulled a book down, pages yellowed like the photo's edges, holding it open to faded maps of these very fields. Boundaries drawn straight, but lives curving around them. Her arm extended close, elbow grazing mine, the contact sending heat low, body taut like fence wire pulled tight. I didn't pull away. The hush held us, amplifying the brush, the shared space narrowing to breaths and glances. Her gaze lingered now, unflinching but softened at the edges, drawing out hidden desires I'd kept locked. Those dark eyes held mine longer, pulling threads loose, the want to reach across aisles, to steady more than ladders. It stirred memories of stolen moments in haylofts, air thick with summer. But here it felt deeper, rooted in the quiet she'd built. My skin prickled, the herbal trace of her soap rising again, mixing with the ink's sharp tang, every sense attuned to her. What if the town saw? The risk coiled, but her softened watch made it worth the churn. Internal churn rose, body betraying calm with a thudding pulse under her attention. Heart hammered like boots on gravel, hands clenching at my sides to hide the tremble. We paused by a corner stack, her hand still on the book, fingers close to mine. Words faltered there, the library's hush amplifying the unspoken reckoning. Desires laid bare in glances, the pull between us a force stronger than the conservative winds outside. She closed the volume slow, eyes not leaving mine, the air charged with what hung next. In the dim reference room, the confession broke through, reshaping everything. We moved into the back reference area without a word, her leading the way through a narrow door half hidden by stacks. Books surrounded us like confidants in the low light, towering volumes on local history and forgotten lore, their spines cracked from hands that came seeking answers. The air here felt thicker, untouched by the main room's traffic, laced with the deeper must of leather and glue aged decades. A single lamp hummed on the desk, casting a warm pool that left corners in shadow, the outside night pressing black against the small window. She stopped by the cluttered table, fingers tracing the edge of an open atlas, maps of ridges and fields mirroring the ones we'd paced. I stood close, the space between us humming with the weight of what simmered. Her breath came even, but I caught the slight hitch, the way her shoulders rose under the blouse. Then she spoke first, voice low, threading through the quiet like a needle in cloth. That photo, it's Marianne. We were together, real as these books, for years before the town made it impossible. Her words unfolded, slow, deliberate. Each one peeled back like layers of onion skin. She admitted the concealed love, the way they'd stolen moments in barns and backroads, arms linked under cover of dusk. But the raw edges of loss cut through, whispers turning to sermons, faith's grip tightening until Marianne fled to the city, leaving Elena to this silence. The town's demands for conformity had carved her hollow, love buried like seeds under frost, waiting for thaw that never came. Her tone carried the ache, unflinching but cracked, eyes fixed on the map as if tracing their last path together. It mirrored my fears sharp, the same cage I'd known. Glances hidden at family tables, longings choked by gossip's noose. Her confession unlocked mine, words whispering out in response. "I've felt it too," I said, voice barely above the lamp's hum. Back home, the fields watch everything, church eyes tallying sins unspoken. I'd dreamed of touches like yours on the ladder, steady but forbidden, heart thudding against ribs that wanted to break free. We stood there, truth spilling into the low light, the reference room holding them close, no judgment in the shelves' steady gaze. She turned then, approaching slow, her boots soft on the threadbare rug. Hands reached out, not for the ladder's base, but to steady the space between us. Fingers brushing my arm first, warm through the sleeve, then settling light on my waist. The touch grounded me, palm firm against fabric, pulling me closer without force. I felt the tremor in her grip, the years of restraint loosening, her body heat cutting the cool air like sun on chilled soil. My own hands rose hesitant, resting on her shoulders, the blouse soft under my palms, the line of her neck exposed as she tilted up. Release came in her unflinching gaze, dark eyes holding mine without shadow, the quiet air charged with mutual understanding. No rush, just that steady lock, pulling threads of isolation apart. We were mirrors then, rural roots twisting the same fears, but here in this hidden corner, the pull won. Her breath mingled with mine, herbal soap faint, the lamp's glow softening the lines of her face. The conservative backdrop loomed outside, steeples and fences, but in this moment it faded, fragile as morning mist. The spoken promise followed, her voice dropping softer. There's more for us, if we hold steady. Not loud declarations, but real, against the wind that scattered others. I nodded, words failing, the space between us gone now, bodies close in the hush. The reference room breathed with us, books silent witnesses to the reckoning, the air alive with what we'd claimed. The night ended with our departure, but the changed dynamic lingered into reflection, her hand brushing mine one last time at the door. I left the library under a starlit sky, the weight of her words settling like dust after a wind, stirring but not scattering. The quiet reckoning bloomed inside, a path opened in the silence that once confined, her promise a light in the dark fields. If you felt this pull in hidden places, share below what broke through for you. Subscribe for more stories of finding voice in the unspoken.